Thanks so much for joining us today. Without further ado, I'm happy to welcome you all to Lessons from Our Journey to Research Democratization, presented by Nico Carey and James Wallace.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Nico, did you have anything to say as we start this, or shall I go for it?
Yeah, let's get started, James.
Okay. Well, yeah. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for having us. And these are the lessons that we've been learning on our continued journey to research democratization. And I'd like to begin just with a quick note on the word democratization, since I think it can be a bit confusing and even divisive. As we're all aware, the vast majority of businesses and orgs are not actually democracies. So to be clear, as we're using this word today, what we really mean is essentially the act of making something accessible, therefore making research accessible. And so I thought that was good just to clear up as we get started. And in terms of how we think about and describe the process, we found it helpful to consider these 3 Ps. So we have practice, process, and people. And these things are helping our team at Brex bring customer research to more designers and more of our partners across product engineering and other teams as well. For the most part, Brex teams are now empowered to execute research, but this didn't happen overnight. And to be honest, it's still a work in progress. The work continues. So let's take a closer look at our 3 Ps. Nico.
Great. So the first P that we talk about a lot is practice. And so, one of the things that's happened at Brex has been, we've really been trying to build the customer-centric culture in all of our teams, and especially James and I are responsible for really building it across our design org. And so, one of the things is there are some designers who haven't had the experience of running research before, especially if they've been previously in a team where they had a user researcher sitting next to them. And so the big thing that we've really been focused on when it comes to practice is how do we ingrain that customer centricity culture into the teams. And so the first tactic really is quite a simple one, which is every company has values that tend to speak in one of those values to some form of being close to customers. And so at Brex, we have a value, which is inspiring customer love. And so, one of the easiest things that our teams can go and do is to go and speak to customers about the problem that they're facing, the solution that they're building, so that we have we really give teams, by doing this, the license to go and make customer research a habitual process. What we found is having these conversations with teams, it makes the mental barrier to investing in research a bit easier, because we talk continuously about living our values. And so when one of your values is so research oriented, it really helps make this front and center of the conversation. The second tactic is encouraging research as a habit. And the really important bit here for us at Brex was leading by example. And so myself, I've been doing 3 to 5 customer research calls every week and uploading them to a repository, being able to tag teams in my org, and really show that going and talking to customers is something that we expect everyone to go and do. And the opportunity of leading by example really helps set and show that vulnerability, that it's something that's easy to jump in and do, to talk to a customer and talk to them about the problems that they're facing, the solution that we're building, and really break down the barriers and show them what good looks like. So give, rather than just building the practice by creating tooling or guidelines or those kind of things, it's really about also showing and not just telling. And so when we get to number 3 of our tactics is making it as simple as possible for larger remote teams. And so when we, if we think about the first 2 tactics, one is, shouting from the rooftops that we should be speaking to customers. Number 2 is showing yourself doing it. Number 3 is, how do you think about making this as easy as possible? And so the thing here is, especially as the second tactic was about carving out the time and showing that even, leadership carves out the time for it. The third is really about kind of making it easy to engage with. So in that last tactic, I spoke a little bit about, having visibility, having the repository, sharing those learnings, and having lots of teams and people do that. But all of this comes together when you have the structure and a well-defined and understood process. And so this is especially true for large and remote teams like Brex. And one of the things that we found is having a Slack channel, having that visibility, having that culture of sharing has been really critical to making it a practice. And so going one step further, I'll hand over to James, who's going to talk a little bit more about what process the second P looks like.
Yeah, so our second P in that list is process, and here we're talking about building confidence across teams. And this one we've broken it down into 3 problem areas that we've experienced, and we'll step through them now. So the first one we've kind of titled recruit, and what we found here is that identifying and recruiting participants for research studies is something that hasn't always been straightforward for us. And indeed, I would say this has been one of our biggest challenges in terms of research. We'll come back to that in just a second. And the second problem that we've thought of here is we've titled it conduct. And this is about how to actually get started with a research study. So how to conduct your research. And then the third problem is about access. And so this relates to people having access to the necessary information and resources and tools, and making that all straightforward as well. So we'll go through these in a little bit more detail. So first of all, recruit. And again, things we've had to consider here are, firstly, where is our customer information stored? Secondly, who has access? And then thirdly, do we need controls? And by controls here, I mean, is there perhaps a need to restrict access in some cases? For example, might there be a need to check in with a relationship manager, for example, before communicating with a particular customer? There could be some landscape to understand there first. And then our kind of solution to this challenge has been to integrate a database of customer information with the tools we actually use for scheduling interviews and surveys and doing all those kinds of research activities. So such as Great Question, for example. And we find that this removed much of the admin and logistical work that was previously necessary. And therefore, folks looking to do research no longer need to rely on as many people, departments to actually start contacting customers and get up and running with research. Okay, moving on to the second one here, conduct. In terms of conducting research, we found that many of our teams didn't actually know where to begin. And this chart you can see here on the slide is it's from an internal survey that asked how comfortable folks were running a study. And as you can hopefully see, a large proportion of respondents were generally uncomfortable. So this became a starting point for us to then dig in further and see where we needed to make improvements to kind of get that into the more comfortable zone. And we found it definitely helps here to meet people where they are, as we say, and otherwise they're more likely to view research as a daunting process or even abandon it altogether, which would be a shame, right? So the solution we've come up with here that's helped us is to kind of find and address any of those specific gaps in knowledge, and also provide opportunities for teams to observe best practices in order to build confidence. And this is where it's helpful to have some research champions in the organization, and we'll talk more about people and roles in due course. But yeah, this is kind of how we've started to identify where we need to put our energy in terms of making it easier to conduct research for a larger number of people. Okay, so let's move on to the third one now. This is access. And considering access within our research activities, we found we could be doing more to streamline the process of kicking off a research study and removing certain bottlenecks. Previously, we had situations where access to tools first had to be requested and then manually approved. And thus it was a longer process. It required more people being involved, which ultimately turned out to be unnecessary. And so, as long as you're trusting people in your org and your teammates, it's a great idea to remove any bottlenecks and unnecessary checks that you may have. And indeed, that was our solution. So we made changes to ensure that practically everyone in the org could find and actually use the appropriate tools with as few obstacles as possible. Okay, let's move on now to the people, the third P, and I'll throw it back to you, Nick.
Yeah, thanks, James. So, all of this only comes together and works from a practice and process perspective if you have the people needed to make research as part of your culture across the organization. And so we've kind of bucketed it into three key groups that we felt was really critical to being able to succeed. And so the first was research experts. And I start here just with a caveat that research experts for us didn't mean necessarily user research professionals, but also people who've managed researchers before, people who have enough experience having run user research in organizations and can show what good looks like, as well as external who weren't at Brex, who we were able to bring in and really start to shape the culture. And so it's really helped us get closer to where we want to be by really being conscious of bringing in expertise. And I think one of the key messages I want to land here is sometimes people think that the easy first place to start is hiring one full-time dedicated research person to kickstart the effort. But what really works for us is being really tactical and actually thinking about bringing as many different people who worked in organizations where they ran a lot of research, people who managed researchers, external speakers to come in and bring that culture, as many different people as possible, because having just one person, they're immediately the bottleneck. And so making it conscious and bringing in as much support as we could was really key to getting research front and center. The second is research facilitators. And so, this group includes people who are going to take care of some of the logistical activities, some of the people that can really build a great process, as James was talking about. And so, Brex, part of this was, James in the design ops role really starting to think through the three Ps that we've been talking about. So, I'll pass it on to you, James, to tell us a little bit more about what that looked like from your perspective.
Yeah, definitely. So as part of the design operations team, I include myself in this group here. And again, yeah, it's about streamlining the process and making it straightforward for research teams. It might involve introducing a bit of process where that's required, but it also could be removing process. And, in essence, I think we've done a fair amount of that, which has helped a lot more people recently get their research study off the ground and get started. We want to keep our product designers designing and the product folks focused on the product and the roadmap. So by all means, they should be heavily involved in research, but it's good if we can make sure they don't get tied up with some of the more logistical tasks that need to happen, especially like using all the tools and all that stuff. So yes, it's definitely, I feel, a big part of my role at Brex.
And the other thing that I would say that James jumped in and did here in that facilitator role was also understanding people's challenges and problems. So, some, as you saw kind of in some of those surveys, being able to have a facilitator role rather than an expert role allows you to jump in and say, what is working, what isn't working, where are you slowed down, like what's inhibiting you from going and doing this. And so that was a really important part in having James at Brex and having the design ops role, which is really about helping build momentum in a lot of ways. And so it was key to the research democratization process. And the third is actually the area that I think was most rewarding for us, which is people who weren't familiar with this before, but are now the success stories. And so one of the things that's been really exciting, and one of the things that we've been doing, going back to building the practice, is sharing success stories. And so I mentioned earlier when we were talking about that P, about like how we wanted to make research very visible. And some of this was also being able to, say how we'd like 10x the number of studies being ran, how we've like increased the number of insights from 1 month to the next by 25%, like really being able to, have great stories. And within those stories, there was individuals who were really, becoming so customer centric. And so one of the things that we've then been able to do there is say, hey, this is something you can go and learn as a designer. This is a new skill you can go and grow. And these are the tools and your peers that are going to help you get there. And so we found having research champions to be probably one of the most important parts in the journey. So not just the experts, not just the facilitators, but having those champions, because the champions are the people who say, I can do this, and so can you. And so summarizing and the key takeaways, the reason why I think this is a really nice, simple framework is, it comes down to 3 things. Making research a habit, which is all about building the practice. And so as much as you can do to exemplify that and have people across your organization showing it, the better. Having an easy process and really removing any obstacles or barriers to making research happen at your company. So really think about how hard is it to recruit, how hard is it to conduct, and what's required to make everyone have access. And then the third is the people dimension. And so don't just think about having full-time research hires, but think about leveraging experts, facilitators, and champions, because that's the key ingredients to really making this a big movement within your organization.
Great. Thanks, Nico. So this is kind of our conclusion. I think this is something that we generally believe across the org, that everyone is a learner and everyone has the ability to ask the right questions. So we don't want to hold them back. We want to make sure that any obstacles are removed as much as possible, and give people the chance to run great research. That's the conclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was great.